Hello, welcome to the Ancillary Justice Review. Before we begin, I need to talk about a concept that me and my reading friends refer to. Tropes and crunch. Tropes are anything that emotionally appeals to us. Our favorite characters, our favorite types of characters, our favorite archetypes, found family dynamics, our favorite things in a book, things like that. Crunch is anything that appeals to our intellectual sides. Interesting magic systems, interesting combat systems, anything that makes us start to speculate or really theorycraft about how things are going. The combat systems in Avatar are a great example. Anything like that is considered crunch. When the two are combined, we usually consider it a masterpiece with our personal tastes. Ancillary Justice is a 1,000-year revenge story starring a ship robot that heavily appeals to our sense of crunch. That isn't to say that it doesn't appeal to our sense of tropes as well. There are a couple characters that are extremely well written, but the main character in particular seems to be more like Julie from Avatar, where they are polite, almost like a butler, I guess would be the correct way to interpret it, and they just seem so dedicated to their revenge. The book has a strong emotional appeal to righteousness, I would say. That comes from that feeling of revenge. But aside from that, there is paranoia. Paranoia is a huge part of the book. There are themes of helping out incompetence and themes of deciding what is morally right, your values being decided by your culture, what does it mean to have those values, what does it mean to favor your own individuality, favor your own moral beliefs. And all of that ties into this theme of righteousness and civility. Actually, before I go further, I should probably tell you the names of the settings and characters involved with the story. There's a slight problem with that, in that it's very hard to pronounce these names. The book does something very fun, actually, with culture and names, but it makes it hard to understand sometimes. The expansionist sci-fi Rome that's taking over a ton of planets, which is the main culture in this book, is known as the Radch, like ratchet, and they go by the plural of Radchi. The main character is referred to by 3 names depending on the situation. Justice Torin, when they are referring to them as a ship AI. By the way, the main character is a ship AI for a giant troop carrier, which is super cool. They were referred to as 1S for the segment of the ship that they are, because the ship is broken into multiple personalities and multiple pieces of the ship, which are all contributing to it, and 1S is the piece that we happen to follow, which is also cool. And that piece is referred to informally as Breck, because Breck is their code name on an assigned mission, and that piece of the ship is basically a human robot. So it looks really like a human. Another important character for the story is Lieutenant Ohm, which is the easiest one to pronounce, and also has the most heart of the story. This book mostly appeals to crunch, but Lieutenant Ohm in particular is just the heart. I love Lieutenant Ohm throughout this story, almost any time that they appear. But the main secondary character isn't Lieutenant Ohm. It's Syverdin Vendai. Syverdin Vendai. Vendai. And they all follow the Lord of the Radch, the equivalent of the Emperor of Rome, and their name is Anonder Miane. And I've heard that the sequel stars a wonderful character by the name of Seiref. To be clear, the joke I'm making is about my ability to pronounce the words and the ability to figure things out. However, this is a criticism in figuring out the text, as I was actually taken out of the text by trying to figure out the rules of the language and how to make this work. There were times during the text that several characters' names came up, and I was like, how do I pronounce that? And I actually stopped in the moment to try and figure it out. For example, the rules of a single A seems to correspond to a hard A sound like A, so Seireya as opposed to Sarah. And 2 A's is the ah sound, so Avardin, which means that was probably named Aim or something instead? I have no idea. But this is both a legitimate criticism and a problem with my ability to learn the text, which I've heard is common with other people. Oddly, they play with the unique language of the Radch, which I always really love. For example, the Radch turns out to mean civilized in their language, so the civilized people. There's a speech where one of the characters tries to declare the Radchi, which is the plural for Ratchet, or for Radch, uncivilized, and they say that it was almost unpronounceable in their language. There's a lot of things like that, like for instance, the Radch language does not have sexual pronouns unless you're referring to like people performing acts of sexual nature. So most of the characters are referred to as she. And because of that, it's very hard to get an accurate description of what the characters look like. I sort of just imagine a uniform and a blob of people, and sometimes they use he, and sometimes they use she. Things like this are exactly why I say the crunch appeals to me more than the tropes. Where like I'm like, oh, that's such an interesting concept, but I really wish I could visualize this better. That isn't to say that there is no emotional appeal within this book. The character of Lieutenant Alm in particular is extremely motivating to me, and there are all these instances of like little dialogue choices revealing more aspects of the character or more internal depth of the character. Just don't expect to get much of it from the description. Expect to get it mostly from your own inferences of the character. The structure of the book is extremely strange, where it jumps between different moments in time leading up to the motivation of the revenge as it's happening. So the opening of the book starts with the revenge plot happening, and then every so often it jumps back in time to show how it's all built up to this long and complicated revenge plan. That led to me, by the end of the book, feeling disconnected from the character, which felt very strange. There were also several moments within text where it felt like it was supposed to be exciting, and I could see that the author was very proud of what they had written, and it felt extremely exciting, or like an attempt at excitement was made, but it just didn't connect with me. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic writing. Why do I not feel anything for this? Especially strong action moments where I felt like the author was really giving it their all, and I'm like, this is a great action scene. Why do I not care? And it would be a lot like Data or an android character from Star Trek doing something extremely diligently and almost perfect. And there's like this sense of awe and majesty about it. And I'm just like, it's a robot. That's what they do. Like, my expectations are super high for robot characters. It doesn't matter what their capabilities are. I always expect them to be able to do the job and be able to do what within their specifications perfectly. So all those moments all didn't feel emotional. Like, I almost feel like they could have skipped over some of them or just like jumped ahead, and I would have been equally motivated. But they ground into them, and the author was clearly having a blast writing them, and I actually just felt bad that I wasn't along for the ride. I also have issues with the crunch, actually, where I wrote down all the little details in a notebook, and I came to the conclusion that it wasn't quite sold enough for me, but that's my own nitpickiness. Overall, I think Leckie, the author, did a great job. Because I overall enjoyed the text, but I have some significant complaints, I would say give it a shot, see if it works for you, especially if you're a hard sci-fi fan. The book is a soft sci-fi, and that might not be to your liking, but it has enough hard sci-fi elements and a hard sci-fi core, and enough focus on the crunch and interplay of elements that I think most hard sci-fi fans will probably be satisfied. And with that, I'll see you tomorrow. I hate how everything's gone to plan, so I rebel every day I can. Oh, I don't know how, but I know I must. I can't even begin to trust. When everything is in your hand, it's hard to think of anything but stopping you. There are plenty of songs in the book I could have sang instead. Singing is important there. Why did I take the time to write this song?